New York State Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie. New York State Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. And please welcome the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful, beautiful summer day in our state's capital. You know, as governor, I travel all around the state. I talk to plenty of New Yorkers, especially parents, and I get into those kind of conversations, having been there. What's on your mind? How are the kids? How you feeling? How they doing? What keeps you up at night? And when I'm talking to parents who are raising young children, the answer is always the same. The cost of living is just too damn high. So this is something that I can relate to, having been a mom. I'm still a mom. My kids still consider me their mom, which is great. Despite growing up with a political mother since they were preschoolers, they've stuck with me. I appreciate that. And I'm a grandma, and I understand profoundly how hard it is for families just trying to make it all work out. It's so hard. And every night the parents sit at the dinner table and talk about the math, and I remember seeing the stack of bills keep getting higher and how we're going to pay the property tax bill or our rent and just the basic needs, right? And then, of course, you think you're doing fine, and it's like, oh, yeah, school's around the corner. They don't fit into anything from last year. We need all new sneakers. They need new backpacks. They need new everything. And so it's just so hard. And you know what? You can't hear those stories and not feel compelled to act. And I want to acknowledge two individuals who've been at the forefront of trying to solve this affordability crisis here in our state of New York. We have with us the Majority Leader of the New York State Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. I want to acknowledge her and her strong support for what we're talking about here today. Let's give her another round of applause. And the Speaker of the New York State Assembly, Carl Hastie, who has been a great partner of mine as well. Let's give him a round of applause. As I mentioned at the outset, New Yorkers are facing really serious financial pressures, and all I can do is look at the cost of the bills, right? The cost of groceries have gone up 23% in the last 5 years. Who doesn't have to buy groceries, right? Every family needs to buy groceries every single week. Housing prices, if you're trying to buy a house, have gone up 17% at the same time. Childcare has gone up 20%. And I think it's not a newsflash that wages have not kept up with that, right? So the strain on working families is too much, and we're losing some families who are going elsewhere where they don't have the same challenges. And that actually threatens New York State's long-term viability. And that's why, since becoming governor, making New York State more affordable has been one of my top priorities. And as I said, I have great partners who have the same feeling of who we're fighting for and what we must do. We fought to raise the minimum wage, and for the first time in history, tie it to inflation. Now that was back when inflation wasn't even a big factor. Leaders, aren't we glad we did that for New Yorkers? We tied the cost of minimum wage to inflation. We doubled tuition assistance together. We held the line on income taxes. We negotiated a historic deal to build more affordable housing because nothing was being built, driving up the prices everywhere. We also are protecting our renters. And we talk about childcare. Together, we secured a $7 billion investment to overhaul our state's childcare system and making childcare more affordable. And just a couple weeks ago, we announced a new digital portal to make free and low-cost childcare available for eligible families online. So get this, and I hope you all heard this last week. For a family earning up to $108,000, a family of four earning up to $108,000, their child care expenses will not cost more than $15 a week. The average cost is $350. That's real money back in New Yorkers' pockets, and I'm really proud of that as well. As I said, it doesn't happen without the partnership of the state legislature, but we know our work is far from over. So we have to figure out ways constantly. We're constantly seeking ways to ease the burden on New Yorkers. And there's a lot of talk about, it used to be the 3 men in the room, remember, during budget negotiations. Now you have the 2 women and the man. And we're all parents. We're all parents. And we talk about intensely how we can put more money back in the pockets of New Yorkers. And today we're going to announce one of the many ways we've done just that. And so I'm announcing we're delivering $350 million in direct financial assistance to low and moderate income families statewide through the Child Tax Credit Program. $350 million, meaning 1 million New York families with children will be receiving a check in the mail by the end of August. Now, depending on your income and the size of the family, it'll determine the amount. Some families will receive up to $330 per child. You have 3 children, that's $1,000 in your family, doubling the amount of assistance that they've received in the past. And can you imagine the timing of that? Right while you're out there doing that last-minute school shopping. That's why we wanted to do this for New Yorkers. And the best part is, New Yorkers don't have to do anything to receive this payment. No forms, no phone calls, no hoops to jump through. It's just going to come to them. So, as I mentioned, back to school in September. Those costs add up a lot. What do I know about this? I checked. A backpack today costs around $30, $40. Some kids want the fancy ones. Some of the lower-end sneakers cost about $45. They go way up from there. Some kids need uniforms, a lunchbox, notebooks, and pens. I'm having PTSD from buying all this. I used to go in that shopping cart and just pile it all in, and it just seemed unending. And with this check, this is how parents will be able to cover the cost of back-to-school supplies and even some clothes in there, and that's why I'm so proud of this. And no other governor and no other state legislature in the history of this great state has distributed this much direct financial assistance to the degree we have to families in New York. In the last 2 years alone, we provided over $2.6 billion in financial relief for families and help homeowners with their bills. What we've done, we helped homeowners with their property tax bills. We had additional assistance from the Earned Income Tax Credit recipients, and we even saved the cost of buying gas at the pump for New Yorkers during the pandemic. So this all comes back to our collective commitment to support New York's working families. And this Child Tax Credit Program is a vital program offering support to families with kids, and I know this is going to make a real difference. This is part of the cornerstone of our collective efforts to help families navigate the cost of living in New York. We're going to continue finding ways to drive the cost down. And I will also say this. What I realized when I became governor, this tax credit was only available for families with kids age 4 and up. Any parents in this room? Yeah, I thought so. They're kind of expensive as newborns, aren't they? Right? I mean, they outgrow everything in 3 months. I mean, the clothes say 0 to 3 months, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, because your babies are growing. And then they want to buy little sneakers, and they don't stay in those very long. And then all of a sudden, the cost of formula. My gosh, formulas and diapers. I told my husband, as soon as our kids are out of formula and diapers, we're going to be rich again. I mean, it was that much of a strain on us. I'd run out to BJ's, and just fill up the shopping cart with everything I could buy as cheaply as I could. So we said, no. We're going to make that tax credit available from birth on upward and not just the age of 4. So that's a huge change. So we did that last year. So that means over 600,000 more children are covered with this, from infants all the way on up to high school, and that's one more way we're just making life a little bit easier. But I know I threw a lot of numbers at you, but I wanted you to hear from a real person in a couple minutes. Not that we're all real people. A person who's living through this right now. A young woman, Lisa Chin, a mom from Westchester, Mount Vernon, who's going to tell her story in a few moments about what it's like with a 2.5-year-old daughter and a 2-month-old son. I think she came up here just to get a little break in the action. So let her, Lisa, you can stay as long as you want here. And this year, since we expanded the eligibility, her family received the tax credit for the very first time. And she's balancing life as a full-time mom, pursuing her own dreams, and she's finishing up her bachelor's degree at FIT, and she's one of the recipients of our tuition assistance program. So with the state support, she's just an example of the people that we care about, why we do what we do, and how we're helping not just her future, but her children's future as well. So it's not just making life livable in New York, it's also making it affordable for every single family. And we won't stop fighting. There's always ways that we can work together to alleviate that burden. And it would not have been possible, as I mentioned, without incredible partners in our state legislature. And I want to bring up someone who's been a real champion for families all over our state, and that is my friend, Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Thank you so much, Governor Hochul. Talking about PTSD, I think I was experiencing it when you were describing all that we as parents go through. And it is wonderful to have partners who understand what people have to do in order to make sure the quality of life for their kids is actually what the promise of America is. So it is really wonderful to have Governor Hochul and Speaker Hasty sitting at this table with all of our conferences. Nobody disagrees that we have to emphasize affordability. Nobody disagrees that the cost of raising a family can be very, very difficult. And nobody disagrees that we as government have to find a way to alleviate that burden. When I was first starting out, a new parent, I was a young parent, I know my first advocacy was down at City Hall in New York City, begging them not to kick my child out of daycare because I made $7,000 a year. They told me that I made far too much to have subsidy. And unless I paid $100 a week, my child could not go. Fortunately, my mother was able to fill that void. But that many years ago in the 70s, we've been fighting for childcare, for affordable childcare, for experiences for our children in childcare that will prepare them for going to school and really doing well. What we do every day is govern. What we do every day is govern with the idea of how people need to live their lives and afford their lives in a place like New York, where if we do it right, we set the standard and we present a goal for the rest of the nation. And while we're having this national conversation about children, childcare, and governing, I look at New York and I'm proud to sit in the table with the governor, with the speaker, representing our conferences, with the ideal of presenting a better way for our kids. This has been an incredible milestone, and again, we are all very, very happy that $350 million will go to people. You don't have to do anything, you just sit there and the check will come to you. And yes, until last year, we weren't even talking about anyone under 4, but as the grandparent of 6 grandkids, 3 of them are, well, one just turned 6, but the other 2 or 3, I know that my daughter and her husband will be thrilled when the check is in the mail, because everything the governor said about how to prepare for the next school season is a reality in my family and so many others. So again, thank you, and it's my pleasure to introduce my buddy. He's been my wonder twin. We have all kinds of names for each other, all very, very affectionate. Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hasty.
Well, first, let me apologize for not being as well dressed as the governor and the majority leader. This is my touring outfit, so I'm headed to Utica and Rome to look at some of the devastation that happened out in Rome. So this is my touring outfit. This is a great day. By no means have we solved all of the affordability problems, but since the time I became speaker, we always said we wanted to have a families first agenda, and this is one of the examples of what we're trying to do, particularly during these tough times of inflation. Just give people a little more, just try to be a little more helpful to people. And since the governor and the majority leader gave their parental stories, I guess I'll give mine. You know, my beautiful daughter Taylor, who's 15 now, and she's gonna be touring with me. She's half happy about going with me. But I remember when she was young, Taylor had to have the super extra sensitive formula. And I remember those cans, they were about this big and they were about $40, you know, for the can. But I was a member of the Assembly then, so it was a little easier for me. But I could just imagine how, you know, another family that had to deal with buying the extra sensitive formula, how much that would have squeezed, you know, their budgets. I think for us, whether it's this, whether it's TAP, it's just, you know, the governor, majority leader, and all of our members of the legislature just trying to say to the people of the state of New York, we hear you, and we're trying to do something to make your lives a little better, a little easier, you know, during these difficult times. And this is, you know, this is real, you know, real money to try to help. And as the governor says, the timing of this right before school starts will be a little helpful. Just like I said, just an acknowledgement to the people of the state of New York that we hear you, and we're going to continue to try to do better. So thank you, everyone. Am I introducing? Okay. I didn't pay attention to the script, but let me introduce Lisa Chin, who's a neighbor, even though I represent the Bronx, but my house is about 2 blocks from Mount Vernon. I'm on the very northern part, to tell the story of what it's like to be a parent in dealing with today's issues. So, Lisa, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lisa Chin, and I'm a mother of 2 young children living in Mount Vernon with my partner. I have a 2-year-old daughter named Tiana and a 2-month-old named Benjamin. The cost of living can definitely be tough, especially when you're raising young children. I often face unexpected challenges when I'm trying to make sure that I'm giving my kids the care and support they need, while I also complete a bachelor's degree in Midtown Manhattan at FIT. So for many moms like myself, any little additional support makes a difference. That's why I'm grateful for the use of the Empire State Child Credit. It does put a little more money back in my pockets. I would like to thank Governor Hochul and the state legislature for the credit that was expanded this last year to cover children under 4, and that made me eligible. It was really helpful to get the credit when I filed my tax return, and I'm excited to also receive the supplemental payment coming soon. And in addition to that, I do get support through the state tuition assistance program to pay for school. And I'm also grateful for additional support I received from a nonprofit called the Bridge Project that provided me with additional financial assistance after having my first child. I've also used resources from the state to apply for SSI benefits because my 2.5-year-old daughter, she has a genetic disorder as well. So, like I said, any additional support does count. It makes a difference, and it's making a difference for me. It's helped me stay focused on caring for my kids while also taking care of myself and pursuing my career goals. I didn't have to make any tough choices trying to choose between the two. So I want to say thank you to Governor Hochul for everything you're doing to support parents and families here in New York like me. And thank you to Majority Leader Ms. Stewart Cousins and Speaker Heasey and the state legislature for all the work that you've put into this. Thank you, and all of the work you're doing is helping me to create a brighter future for my kids. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for coming and listening today.
Thank you, distinguished guests. That concludes our program. Hey, distinguished guests, we appreciate you joining us today. We have to flip the room over for I'm so sorry, guys. Check 1 2 1 2.
Morning, everyone. Hearing none, thank you very much. Go forth and enjoy this summer day. See you at the baseball game on August 28th. I'm already practicing. Are you? Are you practicing?
I don't know that I'm playing, but I'm
All
always
right,
practicing
just saying.
softball. But anyway,
Priorities, okay.
just in terms of the checks, you said they're going to be out by the end of August. I mean, this is just going to be a check for a percentage of the Empire State Child Credit, and it's just going to show up in people's mailboxes. They don't have to do anything else. Correct?
That's right.
Okay. And so they.
But if you don't have children, you don't get them. These are for people with children.
Yeah, I understand. So it is. They don't have to do anything. They don't have to file a form. Nothing.
We already know people's income. We know who's eligible based on their taxes that have been previously filed. This tax, the Empire Child Tax Credit has been in place before. We just added a significantly higher amount to it. So we already know from records what people's income is. So we know their eligibility. We're just trying to make it easier on them instead of them having to, file papers or just, go online. This is what I said, let's just make it easier on people. So.
And it's going out to the people who got the credit in 2023.
Yes, these are people we've known are eligible, and if there's newly eligible, let me ask that question of Amanda Hill, our Commissioner for Tax, to find out if someone is newly eligible this year, how we know that. That's a good question. We'll find that out for you.
Would you support a lawsuit to get the Board of Elections to change the language on the ERA, on the ballot language?
I'm not supposed to talk about litigation, so I will not say whether I would support or not support litigation. Now that I've said that, I support having clearer language so people understand what's at stake this November on the ballot in the state of New York, that this is basically the long overdue Equal Rights Amendment to enshrine women's right into the Constitution, something been talked about for beyond my life. Also, it enshrines into our Constitution the right to have an abortion, something that years ago people would have said, how unnecessary is that? Why would we even bother? That is a protected right in the United States of America. But everything changed when Donald Trump became president and is no longer a protected right for everyone in America. And we can tell even in the state of New York, depends on who the governor is. We actually had a situation where you could have ended up with a candidate who was hostile to women's rights just a couple years ago. So for those important reasons, as well as enshrining LGBTQ protections into the law, I would have preferred there be clear language that people know that abortion and LGBTQ rights and other rights for people with disabilities and others are on the ballot to be protected in perpetuity if they become part of our Constitution. And I don't want any misunderstanding as to what that's all about.
Governor, kind of on theme with today, I'm wondering what you make of Senator Vance's comments from a couple of years ago that some Democrats are childless cat ladies, and that has informed a lot of government decision-making.
All I can do is shake my head. I mean, they've been called weird. They're incredibly weird. I mean, they're just beyond the pale in terms of what is being said. Denigrating women in particular, this is part of a continuation of the lack of respect that people like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have for women in our country, not caring that they strip away rights that we have long held dear, like the right to make reproductive decisions, and now to attack individuals because they don't have children, that there's some lesser person in our country, that they have a lesser status because they don't have children. This is an individual's choice of whether they want to have a family. And some would like to make that choice and do not have the option to. So I think it's just a smack in the face of women across the country, and he's done nothing to rehabilitate those comments. He's gone deeper into the hole, and people ought to be very frightened about having someone like that a heartbeat away from the presidency. So this is going to be a major factor as more becomes known about him. It is surreal to think that there's someone in such a high position, that close to power, who holds such weird thoughts. I mean, that's how they've been described. They are just beyond the pale.
Governor, it's been reported that your administration fired Linda's son for misconduct. What did she do that prompted her termination?
I'm not able to speak about that at this time. There is an important federal investigation going on. She did serve in my administration just for a short time in the chamber for about a year and then moved on. And, we found out about the law enforcement action recently in the media, so we've not been engaged in that. But having been married to a federal prosecutor now for 40 years, I know it's most important that we let them conduct their work, and all will be told at the right time.
On the subject of prison closures, docs made announcements on 2 facilities to close a little over a week ago now, citing an issue recruiting enough corrections officers for those facilities. As docs has said, if recruitment doesn't pick up, they will consider closing more facilities. I'm curious if your administration is backing any specific efforts to try and bring more people into corrections officer work?
It is recruitment, but it's also prison population. The prison population has gone down 50%. So you have individuals, it's very difficult if you're a corrections officer right now, because the recruitment challenges and the attrition, the vacancies that are there makes your job even harder. But also, there are fewer people incarcerated. So from a government policy perspective, it makes sense to often right-size institutions within our control, and prisons are part of that. There was a time there was a building spree of prisons because more people are being incarcerated. Now fewer people are being incarcerated. And so it's just right-sizing our system, but we're always recruiting law enforcement, and I'm looking at issues like what is the minimum wage to be able to be considered. I mean, I'm aggressively trying to find ways. Our state police, we have been seeing a decline in the number of recruits. I spoke at every single one of the police cadet or the police academy graduations very proudly. We used to do 1 a year, maybe sometimes 2 a year. Once I changed the age requirements and raised it so more people could be eligible, we now have 4 classes a year. So something as simple as that, that's why I said with respect to corrections officers, I want to look at what the required maximum age is now, and do we just increase that? So I'm trying to come up with creative ways to encourage more people to go into these professions. They're critically important for our security and making sure that when we have the need for them is there, that we have enough people to support them and not create an additional burden on their coworkers or the coworkers who would be there now. So it's an important priority of ours.
Governor, a few weeks ago, you told my esteemed colleague from Gothamist that you expected to have a plan to address revenue for the MTA by the end of the year. The Budget Office's financial plan that came out, I believe, last week or the week before, said there's a possibility that could be kicked to next year's budget talks. At this time, are you able to clarify whether you expect that by the end of the year, especially knowing that the MTA has to develop a 5-year capital plan?
No, the 5-year capital plan will be released this fall. We're in conversations with them about that. It is very ambitious. And I want to make sure that we have the resources to finish the current capital plan, the $15 billion. Again, we just concluded a $34 billion plan. So the money has been spent. The money has been spent for over 110 years to support the MTA with different sources of funding. So I am firm in my commitment that everything that has been envisioned will continue, the $15 billion here, and already talking to the MTA. Literally daily, my team is involved with them on what the next 5-year capital plan is. So I can talk about it at the end of the year as promised, but I do need legislative action to implement it. So that's when we come into January the next year, and I've already started, just speaking to the leaders about, how that's going to look. So the conversations are ongoing, but they can't act on it until next year anyhow.
Budget, or is this budget next year?
There's not money right now in this budget, but what I was able to do yesterday, for example, to ensure that the 2nd Avenue subway continues. I mean, I will find the resources to make sure that nothing is stopped. I've said that all along, and people didn't realize it at the time. I was serious that nothing's going to be stopped. So $54 million was allocated from our capital funding to ensure that the utility work and digging of the trenches goes on now, so there's no delays. And so I've been in communication also with the White House regularly about the Second Avenue subway. They know it's one of my top priorities to make sure that, you know, their commitments are firm. I heard that from the president. I heard it from the secretary. I've heard it from everybody. So that was something else I solidified very early on in this process. So the end of the year means we'll have the plan. The plan will be implemented in the budget the next year.
Governor, can you be more specific about that $54 million for the Second Avenue subway? Where is that money coming from? What pot of funding? What strings are attached? Can you be more specific?
Unallocated, we call it unallocated capital funding. I have, the money is available. Unallocated capital funding was made available.
Okay, so that's just money that you have available that you can send to whatever you want? Are there strings attached for specific?
No, it obviously has to be an infrastructure capital project, and this is something that I determined in order to keep this moving without delay, because we don't want the cost of contracts to go up, that now is the time to release that, because we had a situation that came to my attention that this needed to be taken care of now as opposed to later.
There's some other pending things with the Second Avenue subway. The tunneling contract, for example, was supposed to move ahead this year, this summer. Do you have other money that you can keep those things going forward, or will there be delays on that front?
What I will say is people know that my commitment to the Second Avenue subway is crystal clear. We are moving forward with this. This has been talked about, I think, since 1940, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm the governor who's actually went down under the ground, saw what needed to be done, questioned why no one had ever had the guts to move ahead with this, and always the answer was it was just too wildly expensive, and East Harlem didn't have the political clout to be able to make this happen. I'm listening to the people in those communities who've been waiting way too long for this to happen, to open up opportunities to get access to the better paying jobs elsewhere. I want this to happen. So if there's any other reasons why there are delays, we will work through them. But again, as I said, this is a temporary pause, right? And for those who did not believe me when I announced that from here in June, they're starting to realize, and the MTA now knows, and everybody knows, I am committed to funding these critical capital projects. And there are various ways to fund them. As I've said, we've been funding these projects since 1910 in our state. Somehow we've been able to manage this in the past through state initiatives, right? But the pause is not going to affect our ability to move forward on critical projects. And other areas, I will look at them on a case-by-case basis during this pause time to make sure we don't delay critical projects.
Hi, Governor.
Hi.
I know that you've had a few stops on your tour looking at the use of cell phones in schools. Some districts are using these magnetic pouches instead, which I think we've seen at concerts and so forth. Would you consider funding in the budget to help districts purchase these types of pouches?
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. Right now, I'm on this listening tour, which has been quite extraordinary. Started in Albany, went down to Long Island, participated in Binghamton, was over in Western New York. Yonkers is next week, and I'm heading up to Watertown. I think I've covered most of the regions of the state addressing this conversation. And what I've heard is so fascinating. You've heard me talk about the Schoharie School District, which went cold turkey 2 years ago after seeing the success of this in a school district in Massachusetts. And they would never look back. They said, no Apple Watches, no smart watches, no earbuds, no phones at all. And that's the entire day. There's no break during recess. You don't get your phone during lunch. And watching how they overcame that, and it took courage, but the parents in that district see their children have been transformed, that they're more engaging, that they're more likely to make eye contact and communicate in ways that other children are not doing right now because they're held captive to that cell phone all throughout the day. And to hear the teachers, you should talk to Assembly Member Bill Conrad, for example. He was a former teacher. He said it was getting so frustrating to try and teach a class when no one was paying attention to you despite your very best efforts. And I want these kids just to be kids again. So I'm going to continue the conversation. I think you know where I am mentally, but I want to make sure that we're not missing some dynamic that I want to hear from. But we have the teachers union on board, NICET. There are representatives from the PTA who've been very supportive. Many school administrators are supportive. And what they're telling me is that it would make it a lot easier for them if there was a statewide policy. And I said I'm inclined to leave leave all these issues to localities because I believe in local control. I come out of local government. But in a case where the situations are fairly standard and uniform across the state, and people are saying, can you take this off of us and have a statewide policy? I'm seriously looking at that, but it would take an act of the legislature. Therefore, I have the luxury of time now to have these conversations because nothing can be done. The issue about the pouches comes into play if there's a mandate, but a lot of school districts are doing this already. I think it was, don't quote me on this, but it might have been the Dunkirk School District that just decided they were going to do this. I thought the cost was $29,000 or so. I will note that we've given historically high amounts of money to school districts in the last 2 years. You've seen me talk about that graph. I love pointing to it because it's very high up the last 2 years. So some of these school districts already have the resources, and they're making those investments in those pouches now. Long answer to your question, but I really care deeply about this. I just, something that transcends geographic boundaries, it transcends political philosophies. Everyone is seeing the ill effects of this, and it's an outgrowth of our efforts that we started last fall on the whole social media initiative, which again, people are very excited and appreciative that in government, we're not afraid to take these strong positions on behalf of families in particular, as parents are just trying to figure out what's happening to their kids, and they don't recognize them anymore, and that's sad. And if we can do something about it, we certainly are. All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.